What if you wanted to forget your ex-love?
You can't commit to anything.
What if you could erase her from your mind?
Technically, the procedure is brain damage. But like vomit.
What if suddenly
That baby's history.
you had a change of heart?
I want to go on!
The eraser guys are coming here. Wake yourself up.
That's working like gangbusters.
Jim Carrey, Kate Winslet, Kirsten Dunst, Elijah Wood, Eternal Sunshine.
I want my mommy. This is sort of warped.
Rated R. Starts Friday, March 19th at theaters everywhere.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome Cuson, and tonight we are going to be finishing our conversation about Jim Carrey. We have talked about 4 very notable movies, and there's 3 from the very same year. However, tonight we are discussing the 20th anniversary of what may be Jim Carrey's best movie, maybe Kate Winslet's best movie too, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. If you are on your favorite podcast player, Spotify or Apple, please leave a 4 or 5-star review to get those algorithms going. If you are on YouTube, please like and subscribe. My co-host, as always, is Brian. Brian, I do have to say, last week when we talked about those 3 1994 movies and I watched them, it was kind of a brutal experience. But this 1 hour and 47 minutes of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind made me realize that I do not want to memory hole this Jim Carrey month out of existence.
Yeah, you had some regrets halfway through, and now you're trying to run around and keep the memories alive, right? That's exactly what happens in this movie. But man, I really love this movie, Jerome. I mean, I've seen this like 3 times, once in theaters, once a few years after, and then once recently. But I just remember almost every single beat of this movie. And it's only an hour and 45 minutes. It gets the job done really well. And I still love the fact that the first act is technically almost like the third act, if you want to put it in chronological order, which is very like Memento. So I love the structure of this, and I think Memento helped a lot in terms of like, anytime you want to do a backwards story like this or tell something in reverse chronological order, you look at Memento's screenplay and kind of use that as a basis. Feels like Charlie Kaufman kind of used that as a basis, but also implied some of his like maybe surrealistic kind of ideas as well. Maybe a little bit of Fellini's 8.5, which we'll talk about maybe down the road. But it's all about dreamlike sequences, and I think that Michel Gondry as a director, that's probably his strength since he was a music video director. And this is his only like major, I would say, like highlight on his resume in terms of directing. He's had some other hits here and there, but this seems like it was perfect for him based on the way that this screenplay was structured by Charlie Kaufman. So it was like a good symbiotic relationship between those two in terms of like the story they wanted to tell and the way that the cinematography is just so simple, and there's like hardly any big budget sets. Like the budget is $20 million, but that's obviously going to the actors. And in this case, obviously Kate Winslet and Jim Carrey, big names for the time. And then you got some smaller roles with Mark Ruffalo, Tom Wilkinson, Kirsten Dunst, Elijah Wood. There's a lot of great names in this. And it seems like everyone was just having fun on set. You know, I'm kind of saying like everyone was having fun doing an independent movie and just kind of like exploring their characters. Jim Carrey gets to explore his character. Kate Winslet gets to explore her character. And it just feels like there's a lot of freedom in this movie, but with like a good backbone of a script. And by the time it all kind of connects by the end of it, you're just kind of like, oh, wow. We basically saw the end of the movie at the beginning, and then it was just this other ending that's tied with it. And then all of a sudden it's like the second chance on love. So there's a lot going on, and I feel like some of the things that Jim Carrey's character goes through in this movie, we can all kind of relate to as males sometimes in some of our relationships, and being just kind of like saying the wrong thing at the wrong time and just pissing off your significant other for the stupidest reasons. But, you know, those are the memories that you have in these past relationships, and do you want to delete them or not? And that's the question. And it gets really complicated, but it's really cool in the way they kind of do a practical effect on the effects. So overall, I think this is a great script, awesome experience. I saw it in the theater. So overall, this is a big plus for me. I'm going to reveal the rating later, but yeah, I just really love this movie a lot.
I mean, I think that this is one of the best movies of the century at this point. And it's funny, I don't think I've seen this movie in quite some time. I definitely seen it at least one time on DVD, but it's been a long time. And in rewatching this, I mean, I was pretty floored at what you have here. Is you have Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet essentially reversing roles. Jim Carrey is playing the quiet, conservative, like guy. I mean, he definitely has his moments because it's a Jim Carrey performance. So I think you're always going to get that. Like when he plays himself as a child on a couple of occasions, we definitely see the wackier side of him come out. But otherwise, he's very quiet. And Kate Winslet is the one that is playing the free spirit, and in a lot of ways is playing the antithesis of the trope of the manic pixie dream girl. I think there's a reason that Kate Winslet was nominated for an Academy Award. She probably deserved to win. I will also say that it is incredibly disappointing that Jim Carrey did not get nominated for this as well. I think their performances are intertwined. And to me, if you're going to nominate Kate Winslet or Jim Carrey, you also have to nominate the other because their performances, although I think you could kind of separate them, I don't think they work without each other. I think they really balance each other extremely well in this movie. And there are times when, especially when they focus on the subplot with Tom Wilkinson and Kirsten Dunst, it's like I kind of want to go back to see what Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet are doing because, and it's not even that the Wilkinson. I think Wilkinson and Dunst are fine, but I think Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet are incredible in this movie. And the thing that surprises me is that they've never been in another movie together, and it shocks me that nobody would look at this and be like, yeah, I want to put these two in another movie together because they're really good together. It's so surprising to me that you get these couplings and that in a lot of cases you don't follow up with it. And maybe that's just a case like in the past you would do it, but maybe that's something people just aren't as interested in doing now. But it sucks to me that we have never gotten these two in another movie, not a sequel to this movie, but another romantic drama or a romantic comedy, whether something as conventional or just as weird. It would have been really nice to see these two, especially older, see what they're able to do. But yeah, I mean, I think both of these performances are really good. I'm really happy that Winslet did get nominated. I think she's definitely somebody that it feels like in recent years she has definitely gotten a lot more credit. And I don't know how much. I think Mayor of Easttown has a lot to do with that. I just think that show hit at the right time, and it's like people really, her accent work was so good, like she just nailed it. And again, I think people have been, I think she's been really good since Titanic, but I think this is this might be her best performance, I would say. I haven't seen, admittedly, all of her work, but this is so good, just because what she is able to do with Clementine and just the way that she is able to make Jim Carrey seem meek, and that is really hard to do. And I'm just really impressed. And Michel Gondry, the director of this, I mean, what a fascinating career he has had. I mean, Charlie Kaufman is still out there making movies as a director. He's directed a couple of movies for Netflix, so he is definitely somebody that is still relevant. Not that Michel Gondry is irrelevant, but he is definitely not focusing on making Hollywood movies. He has made a couple of movies in France. He also continues to make music videos and commercials. Maybe he's just not interested in Hollywood. And certainly there are a couple of his movies on his filmography that would make you believe, maybe it was for the best that he does other things. But this stands out as his best.
Absolutely. And I was really fascinated with his work afterward. Like Science of Sleep, I was really anticipating. That's the one I kind of mentioned last week with Garcia and Bernal. And that kind of fell flat at the end. And then Be Kind Rewind came out, and that was a little more hopeful because I was working at Blockbuster at the time, and it's all about the love of VHS and finding an old movie on VHS with Jack Black and Mos Def. And again, it was a fun concept. It was a little better than Science of Sleep, but it just didn't land. And then he got Green Hornet, and that's, God. I mean, what can you say? I did not like that movie. It made Seth Rogen look really bad. That movie's frustrating, but Michel Gondry got the gig for that, and it kind of just ruined his reputation. It feels like, because that's when he just stopped working in Hollywood. So it's unfortunate. It happens, but at least he can just have this look back on his resume and look at this movie and just be like, okay, I created something that is like, will stand the test of time. And despite it being called a cult classic, this actually did well in the box office, like 74 million worldwide, $20 million budget. And it is a Focus Features. And we don't talk a lot about Focus Features, but like they're kind of was the backbone for Universal, in the 2000s, would you say? For a lot of these, like,
I would say that they were
that
in
not
many
getting a lot of
ways.
love and a lot of attention.
I don't know if they're the equivalent of A24 because I feel like A24 has just become like the last bastion of filmmaking, it seems like. But Focus Features, which is still around, to be fair, I don't know that it is as relevant in terms of like smaller independent films. But I mean, Lost in Translation was Focus. This is obviously Focus. So this is definitely a studio right along with Miramax. That's
I mean,
pretty extraordinary.
Darkest Hour, Coraline, Burn After Reading, Brokeback Mountain. A lot of input in the 2000s for sure, and they made a lot of people's careers. It seems like it brought a lot of people to the table, especially like a movie like Atonement. That's a Joe Wright movie. I feel like that kind of put Joe Wright into like a different level in terms of director. Made James McAvoy a star, but that's just an example of like Focus Features back in the day. I think their latest one, according to the numbers, is The Northman, which is really good, but they haven't really produced anything since. So I guess they're taking it on a case-by-case basis as a company. But yeah, back in the day, man, they were really influential in the Oscar races and stuff like that. So probably why this movie got a push at the Oscars. It won for Best Screenplay for sure. And Jerome kind of mentioned they kind of snubbed Jim Carrey. It's unfortunate, but I do love this performance by Kate Winslet because I was never a big fan of Titanic. I was a little hesitant on her as an actress, but then this movie comes out and it just turned it around for me. And I was like, okay, I see it now. She's got a wide range of talent.
I think I'm going to make you do a rewatch of Titanic at some point.
Oh man, I've seen it like 3 times.
That movie is really good, and I'm not being ironic.
Technically, it's an achievement, but goddamn, do I just not care for some of those characters?
I could. There are 3-hour movies. I'm like, oh, why is this 3 hours? That movie earns its 3-hour minute runtime.
Not complaining about that. I just was not caring for some of those characters, and like I said, I wasn't the biggest fan of Kate Winslet, even based off of that. But this is the movie that really turned it around for me. And I love her hairstyle in this. I love how, like, as the story goes backwards, her hair changes colors. Love that. So, of course, you got to shoot in like a sequential kind of order, I feel. Or they had to have, because if she changed her color multiple times, it would have screwed up the shooting order. So it was just really interesting the way they shot this movie, too, because it felt like, I don't know, it does take place out of order, but it just makes more sense if they would have filmed it in the chronological order of the film. I think it would have been a lot easier, but who knows? But yeah, I think the sets are really, like, I don't want to say cheap, but they look so simple yet so effective in the way they use perspective when they have the Jim Carrey flashback to him as a kid and he's like floating in the in the sink. I love that kind of perspective. I know there's some museums that do that where, like, from afar the chair looks small, but then when you walk up close the chair is really gigantic. I love those kind of like perspective museum exhibits kind of thing. Really makes
I love that this is a movie where Elijah Wood is dealing with forced perspective and where Jim Carrey's driving a messed up car, living up to both of their reputations really well.
You just had to mention the forced perspective with a guy who played a hobbit. Oh boy. But it's true. It's not like that's, like I said, like there's a lot of that.
It's really fucking awesome that they did that, because now they would do it in CGI and it would look like shit.
Yeah, I know. But they use practical, actual, sets, and that's what really made that 1960 set really pop. That was great. That's one of my favorite sequences in the film because of that set is so like bright and yellow, and it looks great. But yeah, I think one of the things that kind of holds me back on this movie is the music. When I go to sleep, I listen to like those ASMR type Tibetan sounds or like some kind of sleep music, and that's what the music did sound like in this, and that's kind of purposeful, obviously. But because of that, it doesn't make it a memorable soundtrack enough, which is kind of like unfortunate because I feel like that's the one thing that this movie would have been like over the top with if they had an amazing soundtrack, which is crazy because a lot of like what I've read on some of these articles about the music is that a lot of like current artists sample a lot of the music from this movie, which I guess is like, makes sense because they watched this in the early 2000s, and the artists today go back to their childhood and kind of pick what they remember, and they remember this movie and they use the music from it. That's what rappers did in the 90s. So that makes sense. But it's just kind of crazy that the one thing that I kind of dislike about this movie is something like people have found the beauty in the soundtrack, despite me not finding the beauty in it. But it's just one of those things because everyone has a certain sound that they have in their head of what they want a movie to sound like. And I felt like this movie was like right on point with the way it sounded, but I just felt like the soundtrack could have been just more memorable. But that's one of the things one of my few knocks on this movie. Other than that, like I think like the casting is really good, and at first when you see the subplot with the Kirsten Dunst and Tom Wilkinson stuff, you feel like what's going on? Is this even necessary? But then when she like sends the letters out at the end, that makes the whole thing like, okay, now I know why they did the side story to get from point A to point B so you can get to point C, where at the end of the movie you get all these like letters going out and everyone's starting to like, oh my God, who's this person that I forget? And then it becomes a movie about second chances, I guess, because they end up together again. So that's kind of the beauty of this movie, despite knowing all the shit they went through that we saw them go through. They have a second chance. So that's always been fascinating to me. Is like, are they going to go down the same route? Right? Is the exact thing going to happen?
I mean, are they actually good together? We're gonna. I mean, we'll never know. But it's a good way to kind of leave the movie. I mean, it makes sense in a lot of ways to give them that second chance. And I definitely agree. I think the soundtrack is very of that time, which is fine. Like it's not a bad. It's not bad, but it definitely could have been a lot better. To me, the biggest thing about this movie, especially the ending, is that I mean, really, I think you're thinking like, why does Kirsten Dunst, like, why is she in this movie? And it really feels like that ending is why she was in it, because she takes a lot of agency for herself in that moment when she sends all of those letters out. Like that's a huge moment for her characters, and it's really good stuff. It's just, I mean, the ending of this movie is perfect. I have no notes on anything. I mean, the script of this movie generally, I think, is really tight, and I would not change a thing. I think at 1 hour 45 minutes or so, I think this is perfectly lengthed. I think if this movie is any longer, especially, I think it would just kind of fall by the wayside, and I think it would become a lot less relevant. I really like the focus. Like, I know that we do have the side story, but we don't really have a lot of characters to follow. We really are just focused on Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet. Like, those are the focus, Joel and Clementine. And everybody else, like Tom Wilkinson, Elijah Wood, Mark Ruffalo, Kirsten Dunst, like they're firmly on the sidelines. And then we get what amounts to a cameo from David Cross. But I mean, this movie, I think, is just really good at exploring a relationship and exploring our relationship with memories too. And I mean, I think it's something, it feels like we've gotten a lot of movies about, characters dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's, and that's probably only going to increase as people are dealing with parents and other family members who have had or were or are dealing with those issues. So this definitely feels like kind of an early movie that is playing with the idea of memories and the nonlinear storyline, the nonlinear nature of memories. I think makes a lot of sense. I think there are some movies where what's happening in Jim Carrey's mind can feel like a gimmick, but Charlie Kaufman is so good at directing and writing these movies at this point that he makes it feel not a gimmick, and he finds kind of this emotional truth. I mean, he does this in Being John Malkovich as well. Adaptation to an extent, I think he does it. I don't think it's necessarily as smooth, although it's definitely entertaining. And yeah, he's really found that kind of niche of exploring these different tales of the mind and this non-linear storylines. And again, those things are not easy, and I'm not always interested in those, but big fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Charlie Kaufman's like earlier work, like Being John Malkovich obviously is really good. I really like adaptation. Like I really felt like the first time I watched adaptation in the theater, I was like, oh, so you don't have to take a book and directly adapt the book to screen that way. You can just like adapt it in such a crazy way that it's like a loose adaptation. It becomes its own thing, and that's what adaptation is. It's a story of adapting a book, and then he got nominated for best adapted screenplay. So I always found that fascinating. Like adaptation is one of those movies that I always like look back on, and I'm just fascinated with the script and the writing of, and the way that the last third act of the movie, they clearly tell you that they're just going to make up a whole new thing that has nothing to do with the book, and they explicitly tell you that. I just love that part of the movie. And then people are kind of, in the middle about Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. I find it entertaining. Some people think it's boring, so it's kind of a mixed bag. But this is definitely up there with like his adaptation script for sure for me. Charlie Kaufman, man, it's so crazy that he comes up with like a fake twin gimmick earlier in the decade or whatever, and then I think they both got nominated, which is even crazier. But this is one of his like crowning achievements for sure. I just feel like because it's not even adapted screenplay, it's like this original thing. So it's very awesome, like the script and the screenplay and the way it's structured together. The only thing that I just kind of wanted to see is like I wanted to see Kate Winslet's perspective. Like we kind of see we obviously see Jim Carrey's perspective on the memories, but that's also this idea that with memories we kind of remember things in a certain way, but not necessarily the truth. Like it's our truth, but not the objective truth, kind of thing. So I'm wondering if they showed her perspective and what she went through during her erasing sequence. Like, did she experience the same memories the same way? Kind of like a
That's
Rashomon?
definitely something I was going to bring up as well. Is like it would have been interesting to see because we remember things in different ways, and maybe Kate Winslet's portrayal would have been fascinating. And I think if you do that, I think you almost have to like just do the movie with those two characters, and you almost like can't feature anyone else, because I think you just have to stay so focused. But I would agree with you, and I feel like if you did this now, you would do it like Apple TV. I feel like Apple would do a show like this in a heartbeat, and you would do.
Yeah, I
8
see like
episodes.
6 episodes. I think would be
Yeah,
great.
it would be 2 episodes too long, but you would get both perspectives.
Like you would get that side plot with the doctors and stuff in one episode to see like to connect that. But then I think you would at least get 2 episodes of his mind and 2 episodes of her mind, and they would show the same scene from both perspectives and play it in both memories, right, and how they remember it. I know we're talking about Rashomon here. If you've never seen Rashomon, it's this Akira Kurosawa movie where this murder takes place and you see 4 different perspectives of the same thing happening, but it's 4 completely different like perspectives of the objective truth. So that's always been one of the most fascinating movies too, if you never checked that one out. But obviously that had to have some influence on this movie as well, because it's all about memory, right? So, and then it's just the way you remember things. So like I felt like they could have explored so much more, but they kept it tight and compact for an hour and 45-minute movie, which is fine. It was perfect for what it is. It's just crazy to think that like the perspective is from Jim Carrey's mind, but Kate Winslet is the one that gets the Oscar nomination. So that's kind of, I guess maybe they balanced it out kind of that way. But yeah, I
think the generally best actor also tends to be more competitive. So I mean, the reality is that there just aren't as good a roles. So I think that is undoubtedly a huge part of the problem. And when you look at the best actor category for 2004, you're talking about Jamie Foxx winning for Ray. You're talking about Don Cheadle in Hotel Rwanda, Johnny Depp in Finding Neverland, Leonardo DiCaprio for The Aviator, and Clint Eastwood for $1 Million Baby. Those are some heavy hitters. It would have been really hard for Jim Carrey to crack it. Although hindsight being 2020, I would definitely put Jim Carrey instead of Johnny Depp for sure.
Yeah, I agree on that one. But it's weird too, because I could see this performance not necessarily needing Jim Carrey. Like it heightens it, obviously. But if they just happen to not get Jim Carrey, I think they could have got like, what's the guy's the Doctor Who guy? I forget his name. He's on. He just came back as Doctor Who as well. David Tennant. I think David Tennant is like that kind of guy that would fit that role too. Kind of like, handsome but kind of shy and kind of put offish and doesn't raise his voice kind of thing. I can see David Tennant kind of pulling that off. But this movie doesn't live or die on Jim Carrey being in this movie. I think if Jim Carrey wasn't in this movie, it still would have found its cult audience, and I think Kate Winslet would still be nominated and that kind of thing. But it's just crazy to see that Jim Carrey like not being over the top, and I think that's what's really like striking about this movie. He's not.
I mean, he
doing
definitely
shtick.
was somebody who was willing to do that. I think ultimately he looked at the landscape and realizes the fact that look, it's great to be funny and wacky, but that has a shelf life, generally 10 years at most. And I mean, this is around that 10-year mark, but I think Jim Carrey was always trying to explore these other facets of his personality and of his acting. And the issue is that in terms of box office, he never found that level of success. Like his success generally always came with comedies. Bruce Almighty proves that. You know, the movies we talked about with 1994, even something like Liar Liar. Well, and Sonic has also proven that as well. I mean, Sonic is successful for other reasons besides Jim Carrey.
Carrey does help the box office, I think, for that, because it just seems like I remember coming out of the second Sonic movie and just having this vibe like, man, Jim Carrey's like having fun again. You know what I'm saying? Like, he hadn't had that feeling since like Bruce Almighty, it feels like, for Jim Carrey.
I mean, I could definitely see that. To me, I think it's just something that I think works in a lot of ways. I think this is a movie. I think it's a movie that's just so good at being what it is that, like, again, as we talked about, like the Apple version of this, where you're doing 8 episodes, like it would be like just you saying the things that you were saying annoyed me. Just because I'm tired of every prestige show like has that formula that you were talking about.
Hey, I say 6 episodes. I didn't say 8. I said 6. Big difference. Just say.
But even just they would make it 8. Like it would be 8 half-hour episodes.
I know.
And I mean, that is a whole separate conversation that we may have at some point, but it won't be tonight.
I think the whole Presumed Innocent show coming on, and we reviewed it last year. We practically almost predicted what was going to happen in terms of the new way because I read the spoilers.
For what?
For Presumed Innocent.
I have not. Don't spoil it.
I'm not going to say it, but we were very close to our conversation about the remake that was coming up on Apple when we reviewed the movie last year.
Wow. So we may need to revisit. Okay, we need to revisit.
Based on what I remember from our conversation, it's almost like they kind of did what we said they were going to do, and maybe.
Okay, so we need to get you. You need to go back and listen to the episode, and then you need to explain it to me. Maybe that'll be easier, so that I don't watch it and waste my own time.
Okay, yeah, because from what I read, it was like, oh, we kind of talked about that, and then switching it up at the end. So, but I also want to talk about really quick the Elijah Wood character.
Creep.
He's gross. He's gross.
I mean, is it if I say mental rape, is that too far? Because that's what it feels like.
Essentially, it's just gaslighting to
It's definitely gaslighting.
An extreme. I don't know if it's an extreme, but it's on that spectrum of gaslighting. But then it makes you wonder, a movie like Captain Ron, right? Does Captain Ron seem so wrong now? All these years later, I've only seen it once, but that's essentially what Captain Ron is. It's about Kurt Russell trying to convince Goldie Hawn that she's his wife and they were never married at all. So I just on that one, right?
For sure. I mean, I'm very excited to see. I think to me the excitement of this movie is just in the nonlinear style and just the performances and just the fact that Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet are acting against type. So yeah, that's the cool thing for me. But a trivia question for you, Brian. In the year that Kate Winslet was nominated for her Academy Award, who actually won? Do you remember this?
Okay, you said Ray was that year, right? So it wasn't the Walk the Line year. Because
Yes.
Walk the Line was Reese, right?
Right.
Oh, man. I give up because I'm thinking of 2005 for some reason.
It is Hilary Swank for $1 Million Baby.
Oh, that's right, because they got the double nod for that one.
Perhaps the most inexplicable 2-time Academy Award winner ever, because the rest of her filmography is kind of a graveyard.
She got her 2 Oscars, so there you
I
go.
mean,
I
look, she
guess.
got her 2 Oscars for sure, but it's just weird. Like, she hasn't really done a lot else notable. So it's
Well, the
just
only
like,
notable thing is that Office segment about whether she's
yeah,
hot or not, which is really weird. But yeah,
yeah,
interesting footnote.
it's very creepy. Also, want to point out Morgan Freeman and Kate Blanchett also on their Oscars. Jamie Foxx was a double nominee. I don't know if you remember that.
Double nominee. What
He
was the other?
nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Collateral.
Yes, Collateral.
Oh my God, I love that movie too.
Put on the list. Probably should have put that on the list, but unfortunately, we did not. So, without further ado, let's talk about any final thoughts on Eternal Sunshine. I give this a 9 out of 10. This is a hell of a movie. One of the best movies of 2004.
9 out of 10 for me as well. It's just the music is. I think if the music was like better, it would have been like 9.5, borderline 10. It's just the music was holding it back a little bit, but other than that, it's still a visual treat. And listen, even though if you have a background in music videos, that shouldn't hold you back because it's going to give you an interesting perspective on filmmaking itself and the visual style. So I think coming from that music video background did help the movie in this case. And Michel Gondry, that's kind of his strength. He's like, these weird visuals and stuff like that, and a very non-linear style. So that kind of worked for him. Maybe he has a comeback. You never know. He's not dead, obviously, but it's never too late for a filmmaker to come back from what I've known. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this movie's great. I think we kind of knew this was going to be the crown jewel of the month. I'm glad we reviewed this last. And I think it confirms a lot of the nice things that we've said about Jim Carrey. And makes me realize just how great Kate Winslet is. And we should definitely talk about her more. All right, Brian, what are we doing next week?
Well, we're continuing our baseball journey. It's Rookie of the Year, 1993. You got a story about this. I guess we're going to say that for the recording. But this is Daniel Stern's one and only directorial movie, like directorial debut. And interesting note, the reason that he gets himself trapped a lot of this movie, so he doesn't have to be on camera. Boom! So we'll talk about that next week, and we'll talk about the approaching playoffs and how we could talk about a little modern baseball. Like Dodgers are doing good, but so are the Padres and the Diamondbacks. So the West is like up in the air right now. And Jerome's White Sox are just kind of, I don't know, giving up anything they want.
But the good news is the pitcher that we traded to your Dodgers is probably going to be the World Series MVP.
God, don't jinx it, man, because he's the guy that you want in the 9th inning, based on what I've seen already.
Michael Kopech. He had the immaculate inning like a week before being traded. He was setting himself up for success. We'll see what happens.
And we'll get to talk about Chicago baseball again for Rookie of the Year, so it all comes together. It's the Cubs. Yeah. But yeah, the Cubs did win the World Series, so their curse is done. The White Sox, they're not cursed. They won in 2005, so it's kind of up to the Cleveland
People
Guardians
forget
right
they won in 2005, but yes, they did win in 2005.
Yeah, and we did start out the podcast journey or earlier talking about like the Cleveland Indians in the 2nd or 3rd inning. We talked about Major League, so we never know right now because the Guardians are in a good position.
Guardians are really good right now. I mean, I think they're going to blow it just because they're the Guardians.
Right, but right now they're in a good position to get some maybe advance to the ALCS.
Brian, I can say this for the first time in a long time. I am all about football this year. We'll
see, because I'm kind of back in it as well because I'm not the biggest Tom Brady fan now that Tom Brady's gone. I'm watching more football, obviously. And that guy Puka Nacua or whatever on the Rams seems to be the next big offensive player of the year, and he seems like a plus 800. So you never know. I might stop in Vegas and put $100 on him just to win at the end of the season. You never know. But that's coming up next month or at the end of the month. And then September is going to be a little different. We'll talk about that next week as well. But we'll tie it in with
wacky in
4. SummerSlam 94 is the key word on that one for the beginning of September. So that's
Leslie Nielsen is the key person as part of that first week. For sure. Yeah. All right. For Brian, I am Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back here again next week.